All right. Who here understands what immersive entertainment is? Anybody raise your hand? All right. Not many. I didn't either, actually. So this is going to be good for both of us. For our next session, we're going to have a great guest. His name is Stephane Rituit of Felix and Paul. So put your hands together. He's going to do a great job and has some amazing visuals for you guys to see. So give him a good round of applause.
Good morning. That's me. Okay. Good morning. Can you hear me? You hear me okay? Okay, great. Oh, that's a while. So I'm Stephane Rituit, the co-founder of Felix and Paul Studio and the CEO. I'm going to tell you a brief story of our studio, which is an immersive content creation studio, which we started 6 years ago with two of my colleagues, Felix Lajeunesse and Paul Raphael, two content creators, two filmmakers. And as they were experimenting immersive installation, and on my side, I was producing documentary, at some point we decided to get together, join forces, and keep this exploration of what is storytelling in an immersive environment. So in 6 years, we created this studio, and now we are 60% working days, and I can say days and nights, on trying to figure out how to bring the best stories in immersive storytelling. And we're doing it on the content and the creation side, but as well on the technological side, how to build the best tool to enable the storytelling. But all started 6 years ago when we created the first cinematic VR experience ever made. We did it with a Montreal-based singer, Patrick Watson. And that's what sparked our desire to keep exploring. But this is just the end point of a longer story which started 10 years ago before we started the studio. So for 10 years, Felix and Paul have been trying to explore immersive storytelling, how we can build the best immersive experiences. And all this research is up to, I would say, 3 years, 4 years before we created the studio. The last project we were working on was a 3D documentary. And our obsession was, how do you bring the reality? How can you recreate the reality in with the most fidelity? So we were developing cameras, stereoscopic cameras, but then we entered into many challenges. Pipeline doesn't exist, as we're trying to create cameras which could work with different size of screen, as we wanted to use a screen as a window to the reality. So we had to create different cameras which fit the distance of the human, of the experience of the audience to the screen, depending on the size of the screen and etc. So at the end of the day, what we realized is that we had to create our own tool to be able to experiment and express the vision, the creative vision we had at the time. And when we created Strangers, and we show it in 2014 at South by Southwest at the team at Oculus, and that's what started a collaboration, ongoing relationship with the team at Oculus, Facebook. They didn't see that at the time. They knew that cinematic VR would be part of the virtual reality experience down the road, but not today. But as I mentioned earlier, we had to create the tools. 6 years ago, VR cameras didn't exist. Neither all the data pipeline, which allow you to manage and control all your data to create the best experience. So really at the heart of the studio, we realized very early on that content has to be tied to tech. And that's why we created what we call the only full spectrum studio. And what it is really, it's a backbone of the creative process. So it's creating all the technology which support the creative, and then you create a virtuous circle between technology and content creation, each of them feeding each other systematically on an ongoing process. Even very early on in the script writing process, when you create the initial ideation of any project, tech is an inherent part from the get-go. And we're creating a unique backbone, which is the structure which allows us to create the best content in cinematic VR, but also in interactive content, and now in AR and mixed reality content. But still, technology doesn't have much weight if it's not rooted in the human experience. And that's where we are focusing. By mixing together creation and technology, everything has to be anchored into the human experience. And that's really what we tried to do when we created our first documentary series called Nomads. And we were focusing on what is the most important. The minute you manage to recreate the reality, bring that to the audience. And what we touched with Patrick Watson, Strangers, it's really still the foundation today of what we're doing every single day, is making sure that there's the notion of presence, that the audience feel is really part of the experience is living. So we expanded that to this documentary series called Nomad, and we wanted to play on the encounter and the presence and experimenting in the form of what is documentary in an environment, immersive environment, where you have to get out of the usual narration, but you're just part of the experience and you live it simply. So that's what we made by creating Nomad series. Then we figured out how to bring Cirque du Soleil content where we didn't want just to capture live shows, but how do you recreate a Cirque du Soleil experience, live entertainment, into immersive content? How do you have to rewrite everything, rethink the entire mise en scène to make it efficient in an immersive environment? Then we created the first long-form interactive content with MiUbi, which is a 40-minute experience. With a challenge, we ask ourselves, how do you create interactive content where you don't have controller to guide the interactivity? And then we were working with major IP like Jurassic World, and we were trying to figure out how to build the tools to bring major IP into immersive environment. Bringing the audience into a known place, a place you've seen 100 times on television. What do we need to create as storyteller to make it an immersive experience and bring it to higher level of engagement from the audience? What are the narrative tools that you need to create? Ben Chili Ball, Traveling While Black, is our latest documentary, and this one we tried to play with the notion of time and space as we're touching into the story of a Black American traveling back at a time based on the Green Book, but also how we can play and present the past and the present at the same time in an interactive way where the audience is immersed in an environment, physical environment, and experiencing both the past and the past, and the past and the present of being a Black American today. And all this, and then in parallel, we started to explore space and starting relationship and working with NASA, and we're creating this first two-part documentary called Space Explorer, which is about space exploration, but filmed from Earth. And so far, this documentary has been shown to over 1,500 people at the NASA, including the entire astronaut team, and to them, they admit that that's probably the best experience which represents, in an immersive way, what is the day-to-day of astronauts. But from that, we started a project with Time, which is called the ISS experience. So we wanted to send a camera to space, and we did it last Christmas, sending one of our camera with David Saint-Jacques in the International Space Station. So we currently have 2 cameras, and we'll be sending 2 more cameras later on this year to film a spacewalk. I'll show you a quick video intro of this project.
Transferring to orbiter continuum.
6, 7, 12, and 13.
There's a lot that goes into sending anything up into space.
QB2 copies.
Copy that, guys.
Luca from Houston, give us the status.
The dream was always to transport the viewer to space and feel like they have truly been to the International Space Station.
We've never attempted something of this degree. The complexity, the magnitude.
The first principle is placing the camera where a person could be.
Everywhere I think you're going to want that is where people won't want to put it.
Everything is being scrutinized at every step of the way. It's a closed system, and if anything goes wrong, you can't call the fire department in space. Cameras have been sent up before, but none with this complexity.
I think there are some subject matters that are better experienced. Virtual reality is the perfect medium.
There's something that's so intangible about living in zero gravity.
Only trained astronauts live and work on the International Space Station. The actual purpose of the work,
We're go for EVA.
it's ultimately about all of us.
Can you guys see this? Awesome.
And thank you. Thanks. And this is just the beginning for us about space exploration. The camera will leave it in the ISS, and hopefully down the road, what we want really is to be able to bring space to Earth. This content will be distributed, yes, as a VR experience, but it will be distributed as a location-based in museums, science centers. We will generate educational material, and we will distribute as an augmented reality experience as well. And hopefully we'll stay there, and down the road we'll be able to bring you to the moon. That's our next challenge. That's all. We mostly have done cinematic VR, but in a few weeks we'll be announcing that we are also developing content with Magic Leap, as we are part of their Magic Leap content creator. Like, we are part of the few content creators which are sponsored by the team at Magic Leap, as we are creating mixed reality content. And we can't wait to talk to you more about that, maybe next year. But why do I tell you all this? Why am I trying to give that in 15 minutes, and I see the clock turning very fast? Why do I want to share with you our experience, our 6 years experience and the 10 years of exploration before that? It's because you must have heard from, let's say, a CEO of a telecommunication company based in the States saying that, down the road, this thing is going to disappear. You might have heard about Magic Leap, about Microsoft HoloLens. You have probably seen that Apple is recruiting a lot of AR engineers, and Facebook doing the same. So at one point, there is a lot of us who believe that the physical screen will disappear. But in the meantime, the content will be distributed and accessible through many platforms. And we have to figure out how to tell, how to experience, how to show the content which will be screenless down the road. And that's why we think, sorry, I'm pressed by the time, but we have to think that we studied storytelling a century, millenniums ago. We were close to the bonfire, telling stories, and then we started to sing and share by music our experiences, and then we started to write our experiences, way to tell stories. And then we started to take pictures and go on storytelling on radios, and then we film our stories, and then we broadcasting our stories, and then now today we're streaming our stories, and we have to think about what's next. And this culture change is about to come, and it's clear for everyone, and it will have to be immersive. And for us, it took us over 15 years to try to figure out how to bring the best experience in the world in cinematic VR and now in augmented reality. And that's why I call this presentation, it's not about the if, but it's about the now, because the investment, the experimentation, the exploration of the creative has to be done today if we want to make sure to be there for the future of storytelling. Thank you.